and also we have some news. And let's see, one of you might want to break the news. Georgia, you want to break the news to our audience?
You've left it to me to break the
Oh,
news. Well, the
sorry.
news is
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Mormons International Edition. I am Daniel Yanez, and I'm joined by
Georgia Travers and
Daniel Ferreira. Nice
hello,
seeing
everyone.
you.
Oh, it worked. It's the three of us once again. It's been months since the three of us were together. It's been months for me as well. I think the last episode that I joined was like in August. So it's been a while. Also, the first international episode in a couple months. I think the last one we did right around conference time. And also we have some news. And let's see, one of you might want to break the news. Georgia, you want to break the news to our audience?
you've left it to me to break the news. Well, the
sorry.
news is it's okay. The news is this will be the final international edition episode of This Week in Mormons. So Daniel Ferreira, Daniel Yanez, and I have decided it is time for us to finish. So end of 2024 seemed a fitting time. This will be our final episode together, which is a shame, but we felt it was time.
This time, this series finale for the international edition of TWIM. Of course, very mixed feelings. It's been an absolute fantastic ride. We've been doing this for about 18 months now. I think the first episode was me and Danny in May or June last year in 2023. And yeah, it's been fantastic. It's been therapeutic. It's been a learning process. It's been great to reconnect also with good friends, or to connect at different levels with other friends like Georgia. You know, most of our interactions were as Bishop and Relief Society president. With Danny, our friendship goes back to family, actually, and to music, but now connecting back on these more church things, and especially being so far away, for me it's been an absolute blast, a blessing, you would call it as well, in a more religious context. So how do you guys feel about it? Danny, we haven't heard you yet.
Yeah, I think it's all the opportunities in terms of church. You know, we have very limited or very boundary conditioned, opportunities to share our thoughts, our opinions, and I think this has been a great outlet for that, a great opportunity. And I mean, having the chance to share our insights on different things, and being, on top of the news related to our beloved church is just, I think, a great experience, and also to have this opportunity to share with a wider audience, right? People that we don't necessarily know, but they can, relate to many of our personal stories. I think it's just great. And for me, it's just, again, gives me the chance to kind of share my point of view, my perspectives, and also to kind of feel, that podcasts or this format, right, also fits into this particular opinion driven and, opening of our minds and hearts, right, related to this areas of our lives that I mean, for me particularly, it's fine part of who I am. So that's been great, and I'm thankful. And recently, a couple of months ago, I had a chance to talk to Kurt, who is, the person behind, this program that has given us a chance to participate in this program for quite some time. And I feel enabled. I feel happy that we had this chance, but I'm also happy that it's time for us to kind of resume our participation and be now in the sites to hear and to applaud and to, continue fostering this endeavor. So
Yeah,
I think this
and
is
I would add to that well, this is the end of this format of these international voices. I've always been very conscious that we are not a representation of the 7 million plus members that live outside the United States. So if eventually any other people might want to to share their voices. I'm pretty sure that this Week in Mormons will be open to that. Also, some of us might not be going out forever. We might join from time to time as guest hosts. Who knows, right? We're not closing the door, and being very clear as well. This is an absolute kind of decision that we have made on our end. We haven't been cut off. Fortunately, we've received actually quite positive feedback. Some maybe not as positive, and we have appreciated the engagement with that. I don't know if I would call it hate mail. We might get to that later on, but I don't want to spoil it. But it's been fantastic to engage with this kind of black box where we send our thoughts, opinions, and commentary about the church and church news, but also seeing that reciprocated, and especially an appreciation for having voices that are outside the mold in the English-speaking kind of, discourse around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of which we are all members of. So should we get into some of the other topics? Lots has happened.
Let's.
Yeah. What has happened since our last episode? Well, some things that we don't want to talk about necessarily, but worth mentioning. I mean, tons of temples announced less conference. There was an election in the United States, I heard. We're not going to talk about that. I think there's been plenty of conversation about it. There was what I call the big Mormon media autumn season. So with a movie that came out, Heretic, it's been talked so much about. There's a series in Disney Plus, at least here. I don't know. I think it was in Hulu in the US, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
It's in Hulu in the US, yes.
In Hulu? Okay, yeah. And I guess it was big enough that even here in Hertfordshire in the UK, I got to chat with co-workers that are completely detached from Mormondom about it. So yeah, it was a big splash. Same with the movie Heretic that...
which you've seen, right? You've seen the movie. I can't believe it that you've actually seen it.
You have.
It looks like a horror movie to me. I want to stay as far away from it as possible. What did you think?
Well, there's been plenty of it, said about it. I loved it. I think it's a fantastic piece of cinema, of movie making. It feels more like a play, because most of it happens in just one environment, or kind of gradually moving along, but it's quite contained to a house, a living room, and then moving along as missionaries teach this crazy guy, right? And without spoiling anything, I would encourage everybody to watch it. Everybody curious about how kind of our faith can actually enable a much wider conversation about religion, and one where our faith and faith in general is not the villain, right? That there's no clear villain or hero. To me, there's a clear hero. The sister missionaries in the movie really come out as very empowered, and the evolution that they have during the movie is really thought-provoking. So I would encourage everyone to watch it. Might not be everyone's cup of tea, because the context that it is presented in is one of a psychological thriller. Some would say horror. I didn't find it to be a horror movie. It doesn't really fall into the traditional horror ploys of like scaring you, and like there's just a couple moments here and there, and some kind of violent images, but that are part of a context where it makes sense. It's not just for the sake of scaring people. So, and if you're hesitant to watch it because of the genre, because of any other reasons, maybe read some other spoiler-free reviews, or even if you read the spoilers, I think it's still worth watching. So I'll stop there, because a lot of it has been said about it. I know some of our other hosts outside the international cohort have also shared their opinions, some of them saying they'll never watch it, or things like that. I hope nobody's sharing that from the perspective of, I don't want to watch it because it's anti-church or something like that. In my opinion, it's not that. And even if it was, we should be able to listen to what people say, and trust that our faith and our beliefs are more robust than what will be affected by a movie, right? So it's a really impressive piece of art ultimately. And
that's an interesting perspective. I'd never considered that before, that it was kind of more like a play or a piece of art. What I'm going to do, I'm going to wait until it comes out on some sort of streaming service, and then I'm going to watch it, and I'm just going to fast forward through the bits that I don't like, just so I can kind of get a feel for it. I think that's what I'm going to do, rather than see it in the immersive experience of a cinema. Yeah. That's exactly what I'll do.
Good. Well, the last few things that have happened, new hymns. I would love to talk about them, but we don't have time. But really excited about them. Sleeveless Garments, I read here and there. I listened to. Anyway, we're in the middle of the Christmas season now. Has officially started. We're in December. Work Christmas parties are going on. I don't know if any of you guys have had yours, or if your wards are doing something or not. Anything in Troy, New York, Danny?
I mean, I'm just watching the snowflakes come falling down. So that's beautiful. It's one of those things. It's not beautiful to shovel the snow, but it's definitely worth, watching the snowflakes coming down. And it's a lovely season. I don't like the snow at all. It's kind of, terrible to manage that. It's awful, but at the same time, it's beautiful. It really, really, dresses the views. So that's fantastic. In my ward particularly, we're going to do a brunch, a Christmas brunch, because we're catering also for the elderly, population we've got in the ward. So then we don't want them to be driving, when it's dark, right? So we decided to have a brunch instead. Although we enjoy the Christmas dinner, this is an improvement again to cater for a wider audience of our membership that needs, daylight to kind of engage and participate more actively and without the stress of getting it dark and then having to drive back home later in the day. So we're excited about it. We're going to have a Christmas program, which is the regular Sunday thing experience. So
and now it's just 1 hour. That's everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's just an hour, and that's always a good thing, because then you get some nice remarks and personal stories about Christmas and about Christ, and some musical numbers. So that's always great. I think that's the wonder of the season. And we were talking with my wife about it a couple of days ago, because we were thinking of preparing this elaborate dishes or whatever. And then back home in Chile, Christmas is summer, it's hot, so every time you think of turning on the oven, it's just horrible. It's just and all the preparations, all the the traditional Christmas preparations are in the oven, right? While in here, it's just kind of a welcome. I mean, it's a thing that you have to do because it's so cold. Then you really want to turn on the oven and having very high sugary, fatty, comfort foods, because it's just the season. So I don't know. It's been different. I've been enjoying it. I prefer the summer Christmas though, but it's fine.
There's something charming. Yeah.
Yes.
Georgia?
Yes.
I think you prefer what you're used to, right? Because I've always had kind of a dreary, cold Christmas here in England, so that's just what I'm used to. But I have also had the hot Christmas over in Australia when we were there a couple of years ago. It was just different. There are good things about both. I was really lucky. Last week I was in Finland. I went to the North Pole and met the real Father Christmas with my 5-year-old. So that was so much fun. It was one of the best trips I've ever been on. I would recommend for everyone to go there. Finland is such a cool country. I had no idea. If there are any Finnish saints listening right now, I love your country. I'm keen to come back. We were only there for 4 days. It was way too short. It was so much fun.
I'll pass that along here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
They only get 3 hours of sunlight a day. So, you're talking about it getting dark for the planning of the ward activity. They wouldn't have much hope there, because it literally, the sun rose at 11 something. It was set and gone by 2 something. It was pitch dark by 3 p.m. So that took a little bit of adjusting.
Yeah,
I'm suffering at 4 p.m. going dark, so I cannot imagine to go dark at, I don't know.
But everything's kind of set up for it. So I did a little bit of hiking, and they have these really well lit hiking trails, so you can go hiking at any time. It doesn't matter. I ran across a cross country skiing track, and that was really well lit as well. So I think they just take vitamin D, and I think they're fine. Yes, they just get along with it.
I'll pass that along to our. We have a sister in our ward. She's in the Young Women's Presidency, and she's from Finland. So I'm she's going to be happy to hear all of the props and the what do you call them in English? The piropos. I'm thinking in Chilean Spanish, Danny.
Yes.
All the good things you said about Finland. That sounds really nice, Georgia. Yeah, I'm looking forward to our. We have an activity next week in our ward. They call it a night in Bethlehem or something like that. I think it's like a big thing that some wards do, maybe a US thing that they brought here. But basically, they recreate like Bethlehem markets in the cultural hall, and they have like role playing and stuff like that. Originally, I was asked to be a centurion for it. But when they asked me, I said yes immediately, thinking that it was like a play or something like that, and I had just to stand there. But apparently, there's a bigger role to the centurion in that whole thing, and eventually, I couldn't do it, and I had to give my role to someone else. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I've never seen it, but those that have gone through it, they're like, "That's cool. We want to do it again." So
I have heard about these. I'm so jealous that your ward is doing that. Can I come?
yeah, of course. Yeah, all welcome for sure. Yeah, next week, 6 p.m. I think or something. Well, we'll send you the details because maybe if I share too many
Yeah,
details, maybe we're
I've
gonna have
heard
too
of
many
them.
visitors from Twim. Yeah.
Well, I think it might clash with our ward party, which is sad. I think they're all on the same Saturday over here in our stake. But
that happens.
Never mind. Maybe I can ditch our ward party. Hopefully, no one's listening right now from my ward, and go to the night in Bethlehem instead.
Good. Well, Christmas is fun. Hope everybody's enjoying the season and that we remember the reason for the season. Let's get to the news then. We'll start with an article that I think needs some kind of a preface, I guess. And George, I want to turn it to you because you did get some listener mail.
Some listener mail. I did indeed. Let's open the mailbag up. So this is from a while ago, but it's my first opportunity to record the international edition since this piece of mail came in. So I'll just read it and then I'll address it to the listeners. So it says, "To whom it may concern, I am an occasional listener and usually enjoy the experience. I just listened to the last episode and was curious to hear your Australian host talk about Nemo the Mormon." I'm not Australian, by the way, but I think he thinks that I am. I'm English. "She spoke supportively of him, telling your listeners that he commentates on church issues. Having never heard of him, I looked him up and found a post by him that strongly implies that the church has been corrupt, etc., etc., etc." It goes on to say your host was implying that the church was being too hard on him, and she also made an implication that the patriarchy of the church needs reform. "I'm not really sure what the purpose of your podcast is, but it isn't to cast doubt on the integrity of our leadership. Maybe she belongs on a different podcast instead of yours." So pretty strong words there. If you're listening, I don't actually have your name, but I'd love to talk to you more about this. I understand that you feel frustrated about my defense of Nemo the Mormon, but at the end of the day, he is someone who wishes to be active in the church. He has since been excommunicated. As far as I'm aware, he's appealing that excommunication because he wants to be part of the church experience in a more meaningful way than just an attender as a non-member now. And okay. So I really am not sure what to say to him other than I will continue to support people in what they want to say. I strongly believe that we should have the ability to say what we want to say. We should have that freedom of speech. And it was really fascinating because last week's hosts, we had Matt and Melissa, and Matt and Melissa had some pretty different views on one of the stories, which was that BYU students, the conservative BYU students, feel like they don't have freedom of speech to say what they want to say at university. So this is the same point, really, isn't it? And I strongly think that we should be able to say what we want to say, even if we are challenging or being critical about church or church leadership. I don't think it's right for us to be given agency then to be quiet when we disagree with something that's happening. And I truly believe that it's only when we start talking and start having conversations with people who think differently to us that we learn to understand each other, we learn to exercise tolerance, etc., etc. So that's my response to all of that. What do you guys think?
Ooh, thanks. Well, it's always exciting to get listener mail, I guess. Probably not comfortable when it's probably disagreeing with some things that we shared. And this whole topic around, I don't want to focus specifically on the Nemo the Mormon case. For those that are not familiar with that case, it's a member in the UK that has become quite prominent and quite vocal and that recently, the last few months, he was invited to face what we used to call church discipline or removal of membership now. And effectively, that happened, as Georgia previously said. I had the chance to briefly meet him, actually, during the last Sunday that we had in our old ward, the day I was released as a bishop. I knew of him. I was familiar with his content. And all I can say from my interaction with him is that he was the kindest human being that you can meet. He was super nice. We had a nice brief chat after the services ended. Actually, he helped us with some pictures, and he had a drone that he had brought, and he used that to take pictures of kind of all the bishops that had served in that ward, and it was really engaging in a very productive way. Of course, he was there to report on some of the things that are happening in the UK, like wards that are being discontinued and things like that, where the trend of the church here has been more on that direction, with lots of ward boundary realignments and kind of examining the reasons behind that. And while I have my opinions about his content, kind of mixed feelings about it, I think that there's a lot of I can judge the intent of people, and what he has said vocally has always been an intent that is a good faith effort to engage with church topics. When I look at the content, sometimes I have a hard time correlating that with the nature of the content, with the tone of it, and things like that. But that's my opinion. But I'm happy to live with that conflict, right, and to have that view, and not to bring it to a point of those voices should be suppressed, or we somehow need to fear those things. That's where I stand, and I extend all of my good thoughts and grace to him for going through what he has had to go through, rather than extend judgment. Even though I have my opinions about his content that are, mixed, as I said, at best. And I hope that we as a community, when I say we, I mean the church, not Twin necessarily, but I hope that we become a bit more comfortable with that. That's the last thing I want to say about it. I think we're too conditioned to fear dissenting voices, and that's just not of God, in my opinion. That alienates people and simply creates more issues than benefits. So that's where I stand on that. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about it.
I just wanted to add something that I think has resonated to me for years now, and it's the fact that when Jesus Christ was here on earth, he wasn't surrounded by, the most faithful members of the church, right? He was just with the outcasts. He was just with people that were, the minorities most of the time. And then he even had many challenges with those that felt or deemed themselves as the most righteous, right? Or as the most, prominent in the church. So my take on it is, as simple as it sounds, is that Jesus Christ loves everyone, right? Those dissenting voices, those that are, aligned, and those that are, striving to become better. And I think we're all in different, stages in our conversion, in our opinions, in our, perspectives, and all those voices and opinions and talents and, competences are welcome in Jesus Christ Church. So, and we have a set of, commandments that we follow, and that's fine. That's perfectly, okay with me, and that's that's the standard that I am, striving to follow, and all opinions are valued if they're presented in a respectable, right, in a format that, it's okay, and yes, again, I think dissenting voices are not wrong if they are presented in a formal way, in a way that is not, diminishing or kind of, damaging in the way you present your ideas, right? And as Danny said, sometimes it's difficult to do that. Of course, sometimes we damage, or we hurt people by saying things that might be inaccurate or might be, harsh. That's true. And I think this whole idea of thinking first what is the impact or the effect of your words, it's always good to have it and to keep it in your mind when you're, expressing your ideas and your opinions. That will be, but kind of, isolating voices or kind of, censorship for me is not what, what the gospel or what the doctrine is about, right? I mean,
Yeah, I totally agree. And I suppose I should have said before that any sort of discourse needs to be predicated upon the fact that it is going to be civil in the way that it's said. Just picking up back on what Matt said last week, he literally said the words about BYU students, the things they have to say aren't always worth listening to. And when he said that, I believe Melissa stopped him and kind of said, rewind, like, please don't say that. And when he said it, I often listen to the podcast when I'm out on a run, and I'd gone on a run, and it was a very, very isolated run. I was in the middle of nowhere. I was basically in the middle of a field, kilometers away from any sort of civilization. And when he said that, I said out loud, no, or, stop, or something like that. I just could not believe that he had said that. I think that voices that are civil and voices that are well thought out, not just harassment or abuse, I truly believe they're always worth listening to, because we can learn so much from people who are different to us. That's something that I've learned in joining this church, is that the people who are the most different to us are often the people who we can learn the most from, because they think differently to us, and we have to have that conversation in order to understand them and in order to be able to develop our what's the word, our understanding of others and our compassion and all the rest of it. So that's my final word on that one, but I appreciate both of your thoughts very much as well.
Oh, thank you. And I think that if we fail to do that, I think we lose those people. That's in my time in the church. That's the journey that I've seen, and I've often wondered how much I have contributed due to my lack of patience or empathy or understanding or kind of thick skin. Sometimes how much have I pushed others out by not responding very well to it? I think it's please.
On that thought of pushing others out, I just wanted the reminder for us to also mention Julie Hanks, because we haven't mentioned her to this point as well. Did you want to explain that one, Daniel?
Sure. So this is not really news in the regular sense. We're not reviewing an article. I promise we're going to get to the article that triggered this whole conversation, by the way. But in social media yesterday, I think some of us follow Julie Hanks. I think most listeners might be familiar with who she is, but if you're not, I understand she's a therapist.
Yes, she's a PhD psychologist. Yes.
Yeah, and also kind of a prominent church member in the sense that she has a large following online, with an interesting mix of a very robust following from very believing active members, as well as members that have left the faith or anything in between. Like, it's quite a unique figure in where she sits in that map, and also in the size of her following. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands she might have on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but I know she's quite influential. And over the years, she's been quite vocal as well about a number of church issues and things like that. And I understand, even though I don't follow her closely, that over time that has become more and more incisive in a way, and more divisive, and from not divisive, but I guess more people taking a stand about her content and her positions, and many kind of rejecting it because they perceive it as being antagonistic to either church leaders or church doctrine or things like that, while other members welcome it as a breath of fresh air, as adding something to the conversation that we rarely get, and that usually gets put under the rug, and kind of bringing the topics that generally people are truly struggling with to prominence, while generally we don't get a lot of that either on general conference or even in our church classrooms. So yesterday, I think, or a couple of days ago, I think it came up on her social media feeds that she was asking for emails from people that follow her that have benefited from her content, and that if they could kind of write about their stories and things like that. So, and I think she said explicitly, so that she could share with her church leaders. Now, when I read that, and in the context of this whole Nemo the Mormon saga and kind of complaining or dissenting voices, that immediately kind of my kind of red lights or red flags, like, what's going on here? Is there more to this story? And it was kind of obvious. I think she knows exactly what she's doing, but kind of signaling that she's in a point where maybe church leaders are getting active in engaging with her in terms of the content she produces. What does that mean? Is she on a path to church discipline? Who knows? We're just speculating here. But to be fair, she dropped that bomb on social media, so I guess we have a little bit of a right to speculate. But I think this comes back to this point of dissenting voices. I just want to quickly introduce the article we've been talking about for like 10 minutes without mentioning it. It's an interesting thought piece by Whitney Owens Hemsath. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's an author. She wrote this piece for LDS Living, so a very church-affirming outlet, by the way. And it's called The Spiritual Power of Righteous Complaining. And she talks about a number of topics, starting from kind of redefining righteousness. That the article challenges the traditional notion that complaining is inherently sinful. You know, that the spirit of contention is of the devil, and kind of that immediate reading from that verse. And suggests that expressing concerns, frustrations to God can be a form of righteous petitioning. Then she talks about Abraham and Moses, and drawing parallels to biblical figures like them that express their concerns to God, and they did receive divine guidance. Talks about vulnerability and ultimately the role of complaining in the covenant path, to use a more like catchy phrase from these days of the church, and suggests that it can be a way to fulfill that covenant of mourning with those that mourn. I thought it was a good piece, especially on a place like LDS Living, that as I said, is very church affirming, and this is very much a piece that is pushing the boundaries on some of those things. And I had a question for you. Do you think that there's space for this in our discourse, institutionally or culturally, even doctrinally or theologically? Do you think that there is space for this concept of righteous complaining?
My first, feeling about it is just thanks for the complaining of the first members, the pioneers, is how church policy has changed in time. I mean, it is because people are not comfortable with certain things or how things have been put in place. It's that we've seen many changes, right? From, I don't know, the banning of the priesthood to the African American or the Black community, to, I don't know, instead of having 3 hours of church religious, to have 2 hours, to reduce the amount of meetings we've got. When I was a kid, my parents would have tons of meetings, right? Or leadership would have tons of meetings. Today, church is more family centered, so Sundays tend to be more more family time than having meetings after meetings after meetings, right? So all these small things that might seem trivial or insignificant for our church have been kind of a big deal. And thanks to this righteous complaining from, current active members of the church, we've seen lots of changes. And those changes, I see them, they come from within, right? So when I think about it, I think it's kind of the way of, again, pushing the boundaries or seeing significant changes in a church that is learning, in a church that is growing, and in a church that has been putting a set of, again, policies and procedures that in time were ineffective for the population or for the life circumstances we're going through. Uh, Again, if I think of a living church, if I think of a leadership that is changing, that is evolving, that is, and we're having different needs, then of course we need to, adjust or accommodate to those needs in a way that is beneficial for a wider audience. Even the sleeveless garments, right? I mean, I don't think no one will think about it if anyone, make comments or complaints about it, right? So again, for me, those are righteous complaints.
Piece about it, yeah.
Yeah, so those are righteous complaints. Like, I mean, this is becoming more and more, it's not that I want to show, or show my body or whatnot, right? It's just that I don't find clothes, right?
Yeah,
it's becoming annoying. It's becoming, one of those things, right?
I do have a question, though, because I agree with the spirit of what you're saying, but I guess my question might be a bit of a rhetorical question, but feel free to weigh in, is that is also how I feel, right? And I look back and I see that kind of members engaging, the kind of being at the forefront of driving some of these much needed changes throughout church history. But how do we reconcile that reality that usually gets suppressed from the more official narratives with the prevalent message from our key holding leaders that run kind of counter to it? I can think of at least two that are quite recent. One is Elder Ahmed Corbett's activism is bad, activism is of the devil type of talks that he has given, and he's been quite vocal about that. And the church has been also quite active in kind of broadcasting that message to the world through church news and things like that. And also Elder Renland's recent conference talk a couple of years ago, where kind of the suggestion was that we shouldn't ask for too much type of approach to revelation. It's inappropriate to push for revelation. And that's where I'm like, I have mixed feelings about it, because I think we can all see that reality play that I think you described, Danny. But at the same time, I cannot fully reconcile or square the circle with what I hear officially. I don't know, Georgia, what's been your experience in this space? If you want to comment at all, if not, happy to move on.
Oh, blimey, so many thoughts. I don't even know where to begin. I have been a big complainer over the last year or so, and it's got me nowhere at church at all, apart from many difficult conversations and doors closing in my face. So yeah, I'm a little bit not on the positive side of talking about all of this today. I think it's essential for us to have our voices be heard. I think activism is a good thing. I think that it is appropriate to push for revelation. Am I going against what my church leaders are saying? Maybe, but I'm also trying to follow the Savior. And who's the church for? It's for its members, right? I'm not saying we need to change any doctrine. I'm just saying there are lots of things we could be doing at church which are a little bit different. And I believe caring about what people think and having a forum to hear their voices is really important. And that's something that's really missing at the moment. And people like Nemo the Mormon, people like Dr. Julie Hanks, if they're getting, facing church discipline potentially, I know that's speculation for Dr. Hanks, but if that's what's going to happen, then I don't feel comfortable with that at all. I don't feel comfortable sustaining my leaders if they're going to silence the voices of people who have different opinions to them.
Yeah, it's a challenging one, but I think the way you said it was very kind, very gentle, and I appreciated it. that there's there's hope in a way, and I want to touch on that last point you mentioned. I think that while I quoted a couple of examples where I've struggled with some of those concepts, and I don't see them reconciling with the much broader and much more inclusive message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, I think there's enough leaders that do align with what some of this article that we just were talking about, the power of righteous complaining, that do align with some of those concepts. There might not be many, there may be few and far between, but they are there, and I'm somewhat encouraged by the overall trend of that, because it does feel sometimes that the arm is kind of heavy when you have to raise your hand, knowing that you're sustaining sometimes things that you don't agree with. It takes a lot of humility, it takes a lot of weight, and many of us, our listeners, at least the one that you talked about in your hate mail, Georgia, or many others, might be hearing us these last 10 minutes and being like, who are these people? They don't sustain the leaders, or don't sustain the prophets. But I just want to say one thing about that. There's lots of us at church, lots of us. And I cannot tell you how hard it can be to do that. It takes double, triple, if not quadruple the effort to engage with our faith, which is real, which is very much a part of who we are, when surrounded by basically headwinds, constant headwinds in terms of how we have understood and lived our faiths. One very early experience for me, and I touched on this last year in some of the earlier episodes, one of my first big eye-opener moments where I saw, oh, maybe I'm a bit of a slightly different member than the average, was when I was in Chile as a young man and realized that the vast majority of members within the church over there in Chile supported or were very happy with a dictatorship that was absolutely brutal and that broke human rights and was genocidal and all of that. And people were happy with it. In a way, they were aligning that with concepts of the gospel. And I was like, this is odd, because I don't agree with that. But I guess I need to carve my space here. And I've done it for a good couple of decades. It hasn't been easy. I just want to make everybody aware that might be uncomfortable with the type of conversation is just look around. And the last thing that I'm sure you would like to do is that by not knowing and not being conscious of how expansive the gospel is and the church is that you, and I say you because I don't count myself in that world. I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum on some of my way of seeing the gospel. You might be inadvertently pushing others away. And I'm sure that for most of you, that's not your intent. If it is your intent, well, there's deeper problems there. But if it is not your intent, my gentle invitation in this last episode that I do, you don't have to deal with me again, so I don't mind the hate mail, is become self-aware of those things. I've gone through some of that myself, but please become self-aware of that. I do appreciate, sorry that I've run long with this rant, I do appreciate that I've lived the last 7 years, almost 8 years here in the UK, where the majority of the leaders I've engaged with are extremely kind. And I think a few miles ahead on this journey of dealing with dissent, dealing with a much more diverse church membership, not in the traditional sense of diversity, but diversity of testimony, diversity of belief, diversity of understanding. And they're not perfect. I mean, we're just talking about Nemo the Mormon, right? And that's on the neighboring stake. But I've been grateful to be in a place that has allowed me to be here. And I know it would have been much more difficult elsewhere. But that's the end of my comments. Apologies, guys, that I took way too long on that. But it kind of touched some sensitive points in my journey. So I just wanted to get it out there.
Well, you know what? Amen to all of that, Daniel. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say, and thank you. I definitely felt of what you were saying, and it made me quite emotional at points, actually. And I think that's a message which lots of people need to hear. So thank you so much for that. Should we move on to our next piece of news?
Yes. Who wants to take this one?
I'll take it. So this one is, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, if that's okay, that the First Presidency has created a new Canada area of the church. So that was this week, I believe. So the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will create a new Canada area. It was announced this week, but it will be effective from the 1st of August 2025, headquartered in Toronto, will better serve Canadian members and leaders, and will be formed by combining parts of 3 existing North American areas. So this change reflects the church's reportedly growing presence in Canada, with over 200,000 members in nearly 500 congregations. So whilst the church reports over 200,000 members, the latest Canadian census record actually shows a slightly different figure for those identifying as Latter-day Saints. That's 87,000 as opposed to the 200,000 who are on record. So what do you think? A new area that is a whole country rather than being split, the country being split geographically. What do you think?
Congratulations, Canada, first of all. That's for Canadian listeners and Canadian Saints. I have a few good friends from Chile in Canada. It's actually a destination where lots of people from Chile end up in. I don't know if you know any, Danny, but any thoughts from you?
Yes. I mean, I'm closer to that area. We're like 3 hours from Canada, where I am right now, 6 hours from Toronto. And I mean, it's great. It's great to hear that they're rededicating the Toronto Temple by February 2025 or March 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So those are great news for the country, right? I mean, having a new area and then having their temple rededicated is just wonderful. And I mean, it shows for me that the natural, again, intuitive perspective is just the fact that if they have an area, it is because there are ongoing needs, right, that need to be addressed in a more local fashion. And that's fantastic. And I think from my perspective, I have no idea, for example, where the area presidency resides. I know they reside in Utah, and they come to state conferences and whatnot to the Northeast, right? So we don't have a local, area authority living within, the boundaries of the geographical location of this area, which is odd because where I come from in Chile, not long ago we had a...
You probably have area 70s, but not the general kind of area.
Correct, but they don't live around
that preside the area. Yeah.
Which, again, in my case, seeing it from a very, worldly organizational perspective is just odd not to have, the leaders living within the geographical boundaries, because then they miss out all, the local needs, the local, requests, or the local experiences. So, to help around that space. So first thing is, like, it would be nice to have, the church area presidencies residing within those areas, so they can, understand a little bit more, have a more closer connection, and then serve those areas better. And again, a rant from our old Chile area. It's just sad to see that Chile is not an area anymore for a long time. Of course, I'm just kidding. But what I'm trying to say is that it was wonderful to have it at a certain point, and now we're just part of South America South, which is, it's fine. It's
we're
okay.
not part of that select group anymore. I think the article actually mentions, like, Canada joins the select group of 4 countries that have their own area: Mexico, the Philippines, Brazil, and now Canada. And I was like, oh, we were part of that group. And I think in 2012 we got merged with South America South, but it's fine. I think that leads to a question that I think is worth putting out there, which is, well, what's the value of an area then? I think, Danny, when you commented, like, having people more locally living there, general authorities or something engaging, I think it has a lot of value. We saw that in Chile in the early 2000s when Elder Holland was there, and the area presidencies were pretty hands-on, kind of out there, and you would see them, right, visiting and engaging quite a bit. But the broader question is, like, what is the value of area authorities and things like that in the broader church? Because I've definitely seen kind of a different approach here or in other places when it's much more hands-off or detached. We have new area type callings as well now, from a couple of years ago for sisters and things like that. So what are your thoughts on, is this a big deal? I guess, borrowing a bit of a concept from the twin siblings, is it a big deal or no deal, right? Any thoughts?
Well, I'd probably split it in the middle and say it's a little deal. It is neither a big deal nor no deal.
Yeah.
I struggle to understand the purpose of area leadership, if I'm entirely honest. And that's mostly a view which has been born out of my experiences now serving as a stake leader. Certainly from a stake presidency point of view, I think there's a huge link to the area. But from a relief society point of view, there's not really a link to the area presidency at all. And I think that's a link which is desperately needed. So as a woman, I struggle to see how a group of men can lead a whole area without any female input. And I would love to see some changes happening there outside of the area organization advisor role, which in my experience of it has been less advisory and more a sort of organizational training role. I don't know what the area presidency do. I'm keen to learn, but in attempting to contact them, my requests have been shut down. So yeah, I would love to know what they do, and I would love to know how they listen to the members. My experience has not been overly positive. So I don't know if either of you have any insights about what an area role entails.
I have some. I don't know how much I want to share, because it delves more into kind of the personal side. But
yeah, and I think I just went and shared way too much on the internet, which I'm now regretting.
Also, yeah, no, I think it's good. I have some thoughts. One, I do know that they're a busy bunch. Like, the way I see them is they're basically an escalation point for all the messy stuff that happens, and that we don't get to see much. So in a way, like, when it passes kind of the stake presidency level, then the area 70 in charge of that coordinating council, which is like a little bubble within an area, is usually the first point. And if not, the presidency, which is this 3-man, general authorities for the most part. Sometimes there are area authorities also that serve as counselors. They do their thing, but it's mostly an escalation point, unless, and I've seen a little bit of leadership roulette on this as well, unless that presidency puts themselves out there and that does something kind of out of the ordinary and become a bit more visible. And I think I've seen good versions of that, kind of meaningful engagement with members, and other versions that I haven't been really comfortable with, which feel more like just wanting to kind of show off and kind of do their own church within a church. I've certainly
They're
seen that mostly
parading around kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit like that, and that comes a lot with kind of leadership style and things like that. But I can think of a few that every conference we sustain as well. But that their style has not been my style, and I'm like, why do they do that? I would prefer that would be more in the sidelines. Now, to me, the role that I do struggle a bit with, and I might be kind of unfair on it. Like this is kind of a kind of basic assessment, but the role of the Area 70, which to me they're like the high council of an area. And if you think of a high council within a stake, and bless them, I've been in the high council as well before. You've been, Danny, as well. Georgia,
Yes.
you serve with high council people. To me, it's a role that doesn't have a lot of kind of definition and meaning or power or authority to do much. And to me, for example, when Area 70s come to preside a state conference, generally I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting out of this type of thing. This brother that is, giving of his time to come and visit us from another country and whatnot, and spends the 12 to 14 hours with the stake, saying all the pleasantries to the stake, and you members are great. And but he doesn't really know the stake. Has no idea. Probably knows the stake president by email or phone calls. And I'm like, is that truly ministering? Like, who are they serving? I've struggled with that role, and to me, and sorry, I'm being a bit cynical here, but to me it's like the ultimate church middle management. And I hope there's a restructuring, because I don't see any value. Probably if you're a stake president or something like that, you do see the value because they're like your first point of contact, but you might not see that value if you're in other leadership roles within a stake like you're presenting, Georgia. So yeah, just those are my scattered thoughts, not a fully formed view. But yeah, I don't know. This has evolved quite a bit as well. If you go back 20 years or 40 years, like the concept of Area 70 didn't exist, right? It was regional
We had
representatives. And
regional representatives. Yes.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
Or, yeah.
And they were supposedly to be more hands-on. Yeah. When I was a kid, they were, they were kind of hands-on and very visible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Positively.
Now, to end on a more
That's my
positive
recollection.
note. Yeah, and to end on a more positive note, and you're not left just with my cynical view of Area 70s. I met some of them that are fantastic and that are great. And when they've come, their talks have really touched me and things like that. So there's everything. But from a pure organizational perspective, sometimes I struggle with their existence and I wonder what they do. So
yeah, totally agree. And to provide a bit of balance on my earlier comments, I don't think that these people are bad people. I think they are good people. I don't understand why the organizational structure works the way that it does. And I wish that it were different, but no shade on the actual people themselves, because all of my interactions have been good. The interactions I've been able to have been fairly positive. So that's my take on it all.
Great. Let's move on to the next one. And it's an article from LDS Living. I think this has already been talked about potentially, because it kind of was released, and then there's been more commentary on it. It's called, "Have you seen this new introduction to the Book of Mormon?" So that's the name of the article. So I'm just going to ask you the question. Have you seen that there's a new introduction to the Book of Mormon? Do you have any idea of this, or is this news to you as well? Yeah.
Absolute news for me, at least. Yes.
I guess
that's news for me as well.
So yeah, that's a testament that. Why is that? I don't know. Well, to give you some context, this new introduction is on the Book of Mormon app. Right, it's not on the church website,
it's online,
kind of the Gospel Library, or in the printed version. It's on the Book of Mormon app, which I understood is mostly used as a missionary tool. Kind of when missionaries are teaching, that they invite people to download the Book of Mormon app, which is a lighter version of the Gospel Library version, I guess. Now, this new introduction uses clear language. It emphasizes the divine nature of the book. And its role in bringing people closer to Jesus Christ, which I think the old one also did, and that the church hopes that this updated introduction will encourage more people to read the Book of Mormon. I thought it would be interesting to do a bit of a compare and contrast with the previous version, or the existing version in our printed or Gospel Library versions of the Book of Mormon. That version was written in 1981, or at least published then. Has had some updates, some of which have given a lot room to a lot of discourse and conversation about it in 2004 and 2006. I think it's worth noting that it was written by Bruce R. McConkie, former apostle of the church, and quite a an interesting figure as well, quite controversial in some of the theology that he was very vocal about, and he was extremely influential from that point of view. And now 30, 40 years later, we seem to be in a different place theologically than most of the things that he taught. So some of the differences. Tone and style is the first one. So the 2024 introduction is more personal, more inviting, and using you language to directly address the reader, whereas the 1981 introduction is more formal and academic. Also, the focus is on the reader, as it says, kind of the relevance to the reader, focusing on the spiritual growth and the connection to God that you can get from the book. The third point is less emphasis on history. On this one, I want to hit the pause button a little bit and get your thoughts, because while the 1981 version provides with historical context, the 2024 version focuses much more on the overall message, and there's a couple of notable differences. There's no mention of Joseph Smith or details about the translation process, the plates and all of that. There's no mention of the book's claim of being a record of ancient American Aboriginal peoples. There's also a distancing from some of these points, and it doesn't include also the invitation, kind of the binary that the old introduction has, that I used on my mission quite a bit. I don't know about you, Danny, or if you remember this one from when you were taught Georgia, when it says, like, if you pray about this and the message that it contains, you will receive a testimony by the power of the Holy Ghost. And if that's true, then the church Joseph Smith is a true prophet. And if Joseph Smith is a true prophet, then the church is true. Kind of like that sequence. That paragraph is no longer there. So any thoughts? Is this, you think, a sign of a wider distancing from some of the more controversial points about the Book of Mormon? How does it sit with you?
It sits really well with me, actually. This is the first time that I'm reading through it. It seems very personal. It seems like it places the emphasis, like you said, on the reader, and it encourages us to think for ourselves. I really like the ending. I'll quote it. It says, "May you find God on these pages and discover his messages to you." That's pretty powerful, isn't it? It invites us to have a relationship with our Heavenly Father, and it's about how we can come to do that. Rather than saying you should join the church, it says you should have a relationship with God and you should learn about his gospel. And I love that distinction between church and gospel, because I see them as very separate.
That's great. Danny, any thoughts? Or still digesting, I guess?
Yes. I think, I think it's, I have no opinions so far. I think it's just great to have, if changes are for the sake of, readability, or, to clarify certain concepts that were not completely or fully elaborated, I think it's just great. If it changes the spirit of the word, then there's something else, right? And we should be worried about. But I don't see that in this case. So, I mean,
I think
all for it.
I agree with both of you, and I appreciate your initial reaction to it. I think the distancing from some of the more kind of specific historical type of stuff, and the shift of tone, I think it's a net positive as well. I think the previous one was a bit more like, look at this, kind of like The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings type book, right? And talking about two sets of plates and things like that, which was very much in sync with the style of Bruce R. McConkie and of that phase, that era of the church. So I think this is a nice pivot. I do wonder why it hasn't been more widely announced, or actually doing a rollout across all platforms, and just this being kind of on the missionary one rather than on the one for general consumption. It wouldn't surprise me, though, that eventually it makes its way into the formal ones. It does beg the question of that I posed before, though. Like, there's a de-emphasis, at least, on Joseph Smith and some of the translation process, which the last few years with the gospel topic essays and things like that have acknowledged some of the narratives that the church didn't recognize originally about how that went. Now that there's a bigger understanding of that, rather than kind of bringing that into the narrative, there's just like no mention of it. And in a way, I think it's a very generic, like, the book was translated by the power of God, which is what we believe. It's fine. But kind of taking a step back from actually talking about the details. And whether it's good or bad, I think that's up to the reader. I think many will read it cynically and be like, oh, they just want to revise history. Whereas your first reaction, I loved it because it was like, actually, this speaks more to the individual, and it's a welcome change. So thank you for your comments on that. I think we just have a couple minutes left before we hit the hour mark, which is what we want to hit. We invite you to join us on Patreon as well for further discussion. We had a couple of articles we didn't manage to get to, but as we approach the end of our international edition, at least the original one, this will stay as the original. Any parting words? Any of you that would like to give some parting words?
I just want to thank the listener for actually getting to the end of this hour and for listening to what we have to say. And it's been a real pleasure to thank you for allowing this person from England to talk alongside two Chileans. Thank you for listening to us. What about you, Daniel Ferreira? Any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for bearing with my accent and for, whichever grammatical, mistakes I might have made throughout the episodes. I had a blast all over this year and a half. Thanks, Danny, for inviting me to this, first, idea of projects and episodes. And I really, again, as I said in the beginning, I really enjoyed sharing my opinion and thoughts. And I hope, in a way, it helped you, sympathize with some of them, maybe feeling a little bit contrary to my opinion. I think if all of that allows you to meditate or think about your opinions and your views about church news or church related topics, I'm happy. And then again, if you want to engage and communicate and whichever you want to share with us, we're really, really happy to hear from you and to kind of tell you what we think about these things. Again, church has been an important part of my life, a really, really massive, way of defining myself. So I'm just happy I've been able to continue active and to, continue, strengthening my testimony. And again, this is a work in progress, right? And I love that idea that church is a work in progress. We as humans are a work in progress, and we're constantly striving to, hopefully, to do better, to be better, to consider other voices and to learn from others, right? Because that helps us, having a better understand, right, of the world we live in and how we can, help others in our, earthly, walk. So thank you for bearing with us.
I thank both of you for joining me on this. I mean, as a lifelong church history, not church history, but like I've been a nerd of all things church from forever, like since primary. Like I'm odd in that sense, and I mentioned this before, but I can remember the days of being a teenager and finding all ensigns and reading them, from like the 1960s and 70s, and being like, wow, this is so interesting. I mean, who does that? I don't know. There's many of us that do that type of stuff. And kind of the 2021 version of that was, I was reading lots of blogs and things like that, staying in touch, never really much in social media. But then eventually landed in the podcasting world. And I discovered a few of those, one of which was This Week in Mormons. And I kind of fell in love with the format, the kind of the tone of it, the faith affirming spirit of it, but also being quite open. And I became a very faithful listener of this one and some of the other kind of sister shows, so to speak, or competitors, if some might want to say. Shout out to the Cultural Hall on that one. Really love Richie's podcast as well. But eventually when the show changed and there was a tweet about, they were looking for some hosts, and I kind of half jokingly said, well, if you don't mind an accent, I'm up for it. And then I got a reply on my DM saying, you really want to do it? I was like, okay, sure. And that's how things started. And that's when I invited Danny. Eventually we invited Georgia and all of that. So as a lifelong church nerd, this has been an absolute blast. Probably I'm the one that loved this the most because it gave me an avenue to kind of everything that I've accumulated for so many years to share with others. And I would say that even if one person listened to our conversations and found any value on it, or made them think about the church, about the gospel, about anything in a new light that was positive, or that was thought-provoking, or that was edifying, as we like to say at church, and even better, if you felt drawn closer to Christ as a result, which is not the primary purpose of this podcast, but we want to remain in the spirit of that. I'll consider that mission accomplished. And as a bonus, if hearing this from voices that are probably not the common voices that you get to hear because of where you live, where you were born, or where you were brought up, well, even better. And I hope there are further international, global voices that join the ranks of This Week in Mormons, or elsewhere as well, in the wider English-speaking conversation going around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it's been a blast. Thank you very much. You might still see us around here and then popping in, popping out. But this is it for now for the TWIM International Edition. Have a fantastic rest of the year. Lovely Christmas. And we love you all. Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Danny.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.